My husband's boss leaned in, smiled, and whispered 7 words I'll never forget. I should have walked away. Instead, I shattered everything. My name is Marla Evans. I'm 47, married, mother of 2 grown kids, and if I'm being honest, I sometimes forget who I am when no one's looking. I live in a quiet little suburb outside of Greenville, South Carolina, the kind of place where the lawns stay neat and the mail gets delivered with a smile. We have a white picket fence, an honest-to-God porch swing, a husband who brings home a paycheck on time every 2 weeks, without fail. His name is Tom. We've been married 21 years, and up until a few months ago, I would have told you we were solid. But now, I'm not so sure. Tom is steady, dependable, a man of routine. He wakes up at 6:15 every morning, brushes his teeth in the same exact order, drinks black coffee, wears one of 3 types of shirts, blue plaid, white, or gray. He reads the business section, mows the lawn every Saturday at noon. And he loves me. I know he does. He just doesn't see me anymore. Not really. It's little things, you know? Like when I get my hair done and he doesn't notice. Or when I set the table with candles just to make a Tuesday night feel special and he asks if the power went out. He kisses me goodbye in the mornings. But it's on autopilot, like how you'd tap a button to close a screen. Not passion, not tenderness. Sometimes I stand in front of the mirror and try to see what he doesn't. I touch the faint lines near my mouth. The way gravity has tugged at my body. I see the woman I've become, older, sure, but not invisible. At least, I didn't used to be. Now, I don't know. And when you start to feel unseen by the one person who's supposed to know every inch of you, it does something. Quiet at first, like a whisper, but it grows. And in my case, it came to life the moment I met Derek Wells. It started in June. Tom's company was hosting a summer mixer, one of those forced-fun corporate barbecues meant to build morale. Tom tried to get out of it. He always does. He hates social events, especially when they involve making small talk with people he has to tolerate Monday through Friday. But this time, he couldn't say no. The invitation had come directly from the top, from Derek Wells, his boss. So we went. The event was held at Derek's lake house, a massive, modern thing that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Glass walls. A dock stretching out into the water. People walking around with linen shirts and expensive smiles. Tom barely said 10 words to me that whole afternoon. He disappeared into a cluster of engineers while I stood off to the side, clutching a tray of deviled eggs and trying not to sweat through my blouse. And then I saw him. Derek. He was behind the grill, laughing with someone I didn't recognize, holding a pair of tongs like he owned the world. He had that look about him, self-assured without trying too hard. Tall, late 50s maybe, salt and pepper hair, tan skin, broad shoulders. Not handsome in a movie star way, but magnetic. Charisma that filled up the space around him. Our eyes met for half a second. And he didn't look away. That's what I remember most. He didn't glance and move on. He held my gaze. Smiled. Just a flicker. But I felt it, like he'd pressed a hand against the small of my back and said, "I see you," without a single word. I looked away first. 10 minutes later, he was standing next to me, asking if I was Tom's wife. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. My blouse felt too tight. My lipstick, too faded. He smiled. Didn't expect that. I blinked. Didn't expect what? You, being with him. It should have offended me. But it didn't. Instead, it made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Noticed. After that, Derek became a shadow in the corners of my days. I never sought him out. But somehow, he was always there. A voice on speakerphone when Tom took a late call. A name in emails. A mention over dinner. Derek wants me on the Carter project, or Derek's pushing the timeline up. It started innocently enough. I'd ask, "How's Derek doing?" while folding laundry. Tom would shrug. Same as always. I shouldn't have felt disappointed. But I did. A month later, Tom forgot a file at home. Some quarterly report he needed to hand-deliver. He called in a panic, told me to bring it downtown to Derek's office. I almost said no, but something in me, something reckless or maybe just starved, said yes. Derek's office was on the top floor of a sleek new building with marble floors and a concierge. His assistant buzzed me in and offered me a glass of water. When I stepped inside, Derek looked up from his laptop and said, "Well, this is the best surprise I've had all week." I laughed, tried to play it off. "I'm just the delivery girl today." He stood, walked around the desk, took the file from my hand without breaking eye contact. "You don't belong in delivery," he said. "You belong in charge." I didn't know what to say. I think I mumbled something about traffic and backed toward the door like a teenager on a first date. And just before I left, he said, "You look good in that color, Marla." My dress was navy. I hadn't worn it in months because I thought it made me look washed out. But Derek said it like he meant it. I spent the whole drive home in silence, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt since college. That night, I cooked dinner in heels. Tom didn't notice. The next morning, I put on lipstick before bringing him coffee. He didn't notice that either. The night everything almost happened, it was at the firm's annual charity gala. Tom asked me to come because it makes a good impression. I think he wanted Derek to see that he had a stable, happy life. A wife who showed up, smiled, made polite conversation. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in 10 years. Black satin, open back, slid up the side. I almost put it back on the hanger, but something in me whispered, "Wear it. Just once." When we arrived, the ballroom was filled with people I didn't know. Soft music, chilled wine, men in tuxedos talking about stocks. And then Derek walked in. He didn't look at anyone else. Just me. His eyes dragged over my dress like he was remembering something I hadn't given him yet. My pulse jumped. My hand tightened around Tom's. But Derek smiled. Cool. Casual. Like nothing was happening at all. Tom got pulled into a conversation near the silent auction. I slipped out to the balcony, needing air, needing space. My heart was racing, and I didn't know why. That's when I heard the door open behind me. Derek. He didn't say anything at first. Just leaned next to me on the railing, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and warm and expensive. "You wear that dress for your husband?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. "I think," he continued, "you wore it to remember something. Something you've been missing for a long time." I turned to face him. "You shouldn't talk to me like that." He tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because I'm married. To your employee. And I haven't touched you. Not once. But you want to." His eyes didn't flinch. "Yes, I do." The silence between us was so thick I could feel it pressing against my chest. "I could say something right now," he murmured, stepping just slightly closer. "That would ruin everything." My breath caught. "But I won't," he whispered. "Unless you ask me to." And then he leaned in. So close I could feel his breath against my neck. He said 7 words. Just 7. Words I can't repeat here. Words I'll never forget. And I didn't say no. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed next to Tom, still in my makeup, staring at the ceiling like it might offer an answer. I could feel the soft weight of guilt settling into my chest, and something else I wasn't ready to name. The worst part? Tom didn't notice a thing. He came to bed after I did, kissed my cheek, turned off the lamp, and started snoring within minutes. Meanwhile, I was wide awake, still burning from 7 words whispered on a balcony, still aching from the nearness of a man who wasn't my husband, still wearing the dress I'd chosen for the wrong reasons. I could still feel Derek's breath on my neck, still hear his voice in my ear. Say the word, Marla. Just one. But I didn't say it. I didn't lean in. I didn't touch him. Technically, I did nothing wrong. But it didn't feel that way. The next morning, I made coffee like I always did. Set Tom's mug down next to the paper, waited for him to look at me, to see me. He didn't. He mumbled, thanks, took a sip, and flipped the page. The scent of Derek's cologne still clung to my dress, stuffed deep in the laundry basket. I didn't have the courage to wash it yet. The next time I saw Derek was 2 weeks later. Tom had a dentist appointment. I stopped by his office to drop off a folder he'd left behind. I hadn't planned to stay. I hadn't even worn makeup. But the second I stepped into the building, I knew he'd be there. The receptionist greeted me like she knew me, offered me water, smiled too long. I waited by the elevator, stomach tight, debating whether to just leave the file with her and bolt. But when the doors opened, Derek was standing inside, alone. He raised his eyebrows, surprised but not startled. Going up, he asked. I should have said no. Instead, I stepped in. The doors closed behind me with a hiss. Neither of us spoke as the elevator climbed. I could feel the air shift between us, the weight of something unspoken stretching thinner and thinner. When the doors opened to his floor, I didn't move. Neither did he. He looked at me. Not my eyes, my mouth. Come with me, he said quietly. Not a command. Not even an invitation. A temptation. I followed. His office was quiet. His assistant was gone. It was after 5. He closed the door, turned the blinds. Then he walked toward me, slowly, like I might spook. I took a step back. Just one. But it was enough. Don't, he said. Not if you're going to pretend. Pretend what? He stared at me. That this hasn't already happened 100 times in your mind. I swallowed. My hands were shaking. He reached for them, held them gently. We don't have to do anything, he whispered. But I need you to know. I see you. I want you. Not because you're someone's wife. Because you're you. My eyes stung. It had been so long since someone looked at me like that. His thumbs brushed over my knuckles. Slow. Careful. We didn't cross a line that day. Not with our bodies. But we crossed something else. A boundary of the heart. A vow, bent inward. A door cracked open and left that way. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. He didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't pursue me the way I expected. And somehow, that made it worse. It meant he wasn't playing a game. This wasn't flirtation. It was something deeper. Hungrier. More dangerous. I began inventing reasons to pass near the building. I'd walk the long way to the market. Park 2 blocks down, just to feel the ache of proximity. I kept telling myself I was still in control. But deep down, I knew I was already gone. It all came crashing down the night Tom's company threw a private dinner for senior staff. Small group. Intimate. Just 12 people around a single long table in a rented wine cellar. Derek was at the head. Tom sat 2 seats down. I sat across from him. Our knees brushed under the table once. Just once. But it was enough. I saw the way Derek flinched. The way he looked away. Like he didn't trust himself. Midway through the second course, Tom excused himself to take a call. That's when Derek looked at me. Just once. Then quickly looked away. I didn't understand why, until I followed his gaze. To a phone. My phone. Sitting face up on the table. The screen was glowing. An open text message. From him. Only 5 words. I can't stop thinking. No name. Just the message. I grabbed the phone quickly, too late. Tom had seen it from behind me. He said nothing when he came back. Ate in silence. Smiled politely. Laughed in all the right places. I told myself he hadn't noticed. Couldn't have. Until we got home. He didn't speak as we walked through the door. Didn't touch me. Didn't even look at me. Instead, he poured a glass of whiskey, sat down at the kitchen table, and said, "Tell me it's not what I think it is." My mouth went dry. He didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. He just stared at me like I'd grown a second face. I opened my mouth to lie. I almost did. But something in me cracked. "I don't know what it is," I whispered. "But I can't lie to you." His eyes closed. Just for a second. Like it hurt more to hear the truth. "How long?" Nothing happened. He laughed. Cold. Broken. I asked, "How long, Marla?" I sank into the chair across from him. A few months. Maybe less. He took a sip of whiskey. Set the glass down with a soft clink. Then he said the thing I'll never forget. "I should have seen it coming. I haven't seen you in years." Silence. Heavy. Devastating. And then he stood. Left the room. Left me. Left the ring, his wedding ring on the counter. He didn't come home that night. Or the next. He didn't answer texts. Didn't respond to calls. The man who never broke routine disappeared without a word. And me? I sat on the porch swing alone, the one we never used, watching the wind move through the trees. Still wearing the same clothes from the dinner. Still trying to understand the ruin I had made. Derek didn't call either. I think he knew better. What we had wasn't love. It was a spark in a drought. Something dry catching fire. But fire destroys. Tom hasn't filed for divorce. Not yet. But the silence between us is louder than any goodbye. I still make his coffee some mornings, just in case he walks through that door again. But now I add cream. He always drank it black. And maybe that's the cruelest part of all, because even if he comes back, we will never be the same. He left the ring. I left everything else.